The average farmer is 58, 59, 60 years old. Where do financial professionals fit into that picture? Over the next 30 years, 70% of farms are going to be changing hands. They're going to the next generation.
Welcome into Impactful Conversations, stories and lessons for financial advisors. I'm your host, Dave Edgecombe. Joining me, we've got Carlos Zarate. He's the Senior Advanced Planning Consultant with Augustar Financial. Thank you so much for taking the time, Carlos.
Dave, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
We've got a really interesting conversation on tap because Carlos is here to talk about what is an incredibly niche market, but an incredible niche opportunity for financial advisors, and that's agribusiness. He's come with stats, he's come with insight, and he's also got some solutions for what can be a very unique opportunity for financial advisors. So first up, though, I want to set the stage with a stat. 888 million acres of farmland in the U.S. That's roughly 39% of all the land in the United States. 39%. That's a big swath of country right there. I want to know what it speaks to the opportunity, but Carlos, when you hear that number, what's the opportunity? What do you hear what do you think when you hear that?
Dave, it's an incredible stat. It's hard to believe, but then I realized, hey, I'm here in Columbus, Ohio, and you drive 20, 30 minutes in any direction outside of the city, and it's just farm. It's just farm. So, okay, that becomes more believable. And what's really interesting about that number, 39% of U.S. land is farmland, is that 95% of farms are family owned and operated in the United States. So it's an incredibly large part of our nation's GDP. I think over 5% of our GDP is made up of agribusiness. But yeah, it's an incredible opportunity for financial professionals to learn about this and engage their farming clients about it.
And so when I was talking about this podcast with the team here at Impact, and I kind of ran through the outline, and I had something in there, and they said, "Oh, you got to get this way higher up because this is something that the average financial advisor thinks when they hear agribusiness and farming in general is land rich, cash poor." And that being sort of well, okay, but what's the opportunity there for me? I want to know, should that be a red flag for a financial advisor? And if not, why so?
So the short answer is no, it should not be a red flag. I think there's a lot of opportunity for financial professionals to help their farming clients, farmers in general. Why? Because they have net operating income. They have to allocate that income. And if they don't have the proper life insurance in place or the proper retirement planning in place, it's time to sit down. Let's talk about some potential solutions, uncover some potential opportunities. And it should not scare away financial professionals from this niche market, to your point. There's a lot of opportunity here.
Do you think they need to be a specialist? Do you think they need to necessarily be locked into this specific industry?
Well, I think when you're dealing with business owners in general, every industry is going to be niche. It's going to have its own lexicon, its own universe of different terminology. That said, if you're sitting down with an agribusiness client, it's important to have that conversation. Do not run away from it. Have that conversation and just be a listener. Collect data, gather information, understand the family dynamic. These are the key things that a financial professional should be taking away in that first conversation, along with, hey, we have resources across the industry, including Augustar, to help guide those conversations, to help the business owner clients with, let's say, a business valuation or a document review service. And to answer your point, David, no, they should not be turned away from that kind of conversation, even if they're not necessarily experts on that particular industry.
I want to get to those conversations and the best ways to frame them and some of those opportunities and the ways that Augustar can kind of slide themselves in and help with that conversation. But I also want to lean on you a little bit as subject matter expert. You see a lot from your vantage point. You kind of see it from the financial professional side, but also from the agribusiness perspective. So can you give me, and I know this is a loaded question, can you give me the sort of the state of the union in terms of what the agribusiness landscape is like in the U.S. right now?
Yeah, it's a big question. You're right. But I think it can be summarized with a couple of points. So I want to start off with the positive. There are a lot of farms across the United States that are doing tremendously well. They're profiting. They're keeping the farm in the family name, and generation after generation is keeping it successful. Okay. With that being said, since 1997 we've lost over 300,000 farms in the United States. And really, we're at the fewest number of farms in modern US history. I think one of the key things everybody thinks about is these mega conglomerate farming corporations kind of buying up these family farms. That's absolutely true, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. Another piece of the puzzle, I think, is also on everybody's minds: tariffs, right? If you're a soybean farmer, right? If you're a soybean farmer and China was the number one importer of US soybeans, and these tit for tat tariff and retaliatory tariffs, these trade wars can have a hugely negative effect for those soybean farmers. And even now that the market's back open to China, well, China has shifted. They're now looking at Brazil as one of their key markets to import soybeans from, as opposed to the United States. So soybean farmers aren't exactly happy about that. And that's just representative of kind of a more general point when it comes to these tariffs. So that's a little bit on that. Now, another macroeconomic statistic when it comes to agribusiness is in 2025, we saw 50%, nearly 50% more farm bankruptcies compared to the previous year, 2024. So a lot of this has to do with macroeconomic conditions, whether it be Mother Nature or price yields or tariffs. But a lot of this is also dependent on the next generation not necessarily being interested in taking over these legacy farms. And quite frankly, you can't blame them. It's a lot of work and sometimes for little reward. So that's kind of the big picture, I would say, Dave. But let me know your thoughts on that.
Well, I think you brought up a couple of good points in there, and it leads to this supply chain. And something happens over here, and all of a sudden it's felt in Nebraska, or it's felt in Arizona, California, wherever things are being grown. And so is it a really volatile industry in that sense that, yes, tariffs are obviously big ticket things, or they grab your attention, but even smaller things can make this a very, very kind of moving target, so to speak, in terms of crop yields?
Absolutely. And there are government programs, crop insurance is one. So basically, federally subsidized insurance premiums. So if there are particularly bad crop yields, a bad harvest, a lot of these farmers can get a little bit of help, get a little bit of a subsidy from the government. Now, that being said, we are in a regime right now where, starting all the way back in 2018 and before, truth be told, we're looking at big emergency style bailouts year after year after year. First because of the first round of trade wars, then because of the pandemic, and then another round of trade wars. So, and that's not to mention again Mother Nature and just the effects that a bad harvest can have. And so we're in a very tenuous position when it comes to agribusiness in general, and not to mention inflation or high interest rates, these other big picture trends that can affect a family business.
Those are sort of the outside factors. But one thing you said, and you used the F word, family, that these are family farms. And when in pretty much any other facet, a financial advisor or a financial professional needs to be able to work with a family and not just the individual, and kind of see the bigger picture. And that's how they make themselves sticky. That's the word that we like to use, is how do you make yourself sticky with your clients? It's bringing in that next generation. And the multi-generational aspect of family farms, you said in our pre-call, guesstimated about 8 out of 10 advisors would push this business to a specialist. You guys say not so fast. So is the next link in the chain for a financial professional to really grab onto this sort of business in this niche, business valuation, succession planning, and starting those conversations with their clients?
Absolutely. And let me touch very briefly on 3 points: succession planning, selling a farm, selling a business in general, and lastly, retirement planning. But all of these conversations start with business valuation, and that happens to be a service that my team at Augustar in advanced planning can help. And it's not thousands of dollars, it's a nominal fee. And what we'll do is we'll provide the business owner a data taker, one page front and back. They fill it out, they submit it back to my team, and we generate a 29-page report saying, "Hey, here's the value of your farm, here's the value of your business." And that's a really good reference point to start a lot of these conversations. We'll equip financial professionals with the conversation starters, how to review these reports with them. But let's touch on the first thing, succession planning. So imagine a business valuation comes back and the farm's worth $1 million. Okay, here's a case study. Let's call it a dairy farm. And we actually did a business valuation on a dairy farm last year, a very successful dairy farm in Michigan. It was actually worth $50 million, give or take. But for our purposes, let's simplify it and let's say it was $1 million. Okay.
Thank you.
And right. And then dad was the sole operator and owner of the business. He had two heirs, a daughter who wanted to remain active in the business, and a son who wanted nothing to do with the business. He moved to the city. He's got a 100% remote job. He's doing okay without the farm. So how do we succession plan with that kind of situation? And one of the ways to do it is to say, okay, let's have dad buy life insurance. Okay, death benefit, roughly $1 million. And when dad passes away, the active daughter will inherit the farm and the son will inherit the $1 million death benefit proceeds from the life insurance. Now, I do recommend, even though in this particular situation, we don't have an estate tax problem, we're talking about $1 million or maybe a couple $1 million. But a revocable trust might still be a smart idea. Because the trustee can ensure that there's a degree of let's call it equalization between the farm value and the death benefit proceeds that are paid out to the son. So imagine now, Dave, that we go back to the dairy farm that's $50 million. We do have an estate tax issue, probably. That's where we probably want to use an ILET, an irrevocable life insurance trust. And that way we can get a lot of that death benefit proceeds outside of the state, and it's not taxable to dad's estate. Now, one last thing I'll say on that first point is we're talking about life insurance. Let's talk about key person life insurance. Let's say the daughter is active and she is a key person, a top manager in the family farm. If she passes away, that can cause a lot of issues for the farm stability. Well, if we have a key person life insurance policy on the daughter, we get a capital injection from death benefit proceeds if she passes away, stabilizing the farm operations. And it's always a good idea to have key person life insurance as well. So that's just the first point, but let me pause there and get your thoughts on that.
Well, you're hitting a lot of the high notes, and you're talking a financial professional's language with a lot of what you just said there. And that, to our point, is why this should not be viewed as somebody else's opportunity. It is right there in front of you, provided you're already having estate planning and these sorts of conversations with your existing clients. You mentioned retirement planning. I want to know how these conversations with family-owned farmers, and especially that sole proprietor, if it is the patriarch of the family, how that retirement planning conversation is different, or maybe it's the same.
Yeah, I think it can be different for business owners. First off, business owners have access to some of these other retirement accounts that maybe a W-2 employee doesn't. Let's talk about SEP IRA, solo 401k. Now, USDA and Farm Financial Guidelines often tout, hey, the SEP IRA with its higher contribution limits up to $72,000 in 2026. This is an incredible opportunity for farmers to put that extra cash in a tax-advantaged retirement account and prepare for retirement, right? So let's come up with another example kind of in that vein. Instead of dad wanting to keep the farm for the rest of his life and then daughter will inherit it when he passes away, what if he wants to sell the farm during his life to his daughter or to an outside buyer. It doesn't matter. Well, let's talk about an installment sale, for example. So, an installment sale is a way to say, okay, we agree on a price of $1 million over 5 years, and we'll do $200,000 a year plus any interest. And that way, the buyer doesn't have to fork up $1 million all at once. So, if the daughter is the buyer in this situation, it's a really great opportunity for the installment sales to kind of spread out that purchase price. So back to retirement planning, maybe dad has a SEP IRA. If he doesn't have any employees, maybe he's got a solo 401k. Okay. But now he's getting installment sale proceeds, $200,000, then $400,000, and so on. That's an opportunity to fund an income generating annuity, guaranteed income for life, because again, we don't have a pension if we're a farmer, most likely. We have to create pension like income on our own. And an annuity solution like a fixed index annuity with an income rider or any other kind of income annuity can be a great strategy. And you, as the financial professional, can really do you can really take a look at, okay, what are the income needs in retirement for this particular business owner and help them out on that front.
Do you think pushback on an annuity from a farmer is to be expected, much like it would be with your average retiree when they don't fully understand the concept?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of stigma around annuities, and the annuity space is very complicated. So if you're an average annuity buyer, it's very hard to understand, okay, what's a MIGA versus what's a fixed index annuity or a variable annuity, et cetera. But that being said, when it comes to generating pension-like guaranteed lifetime income, it can be a huge benefit. And I think if you sit down, well, let me give you this one, Dave. This is interesting. Our data taker, our business valuation data taker, has some questions that uncover potential opportunities. One of those questions on that data taker is, do you, Mr. Mrs. Business Owner, have efficient guaranteed income in retirement to cover your anticipated expenses in retirement above any Social Security? And if that business owner is going to mark no on that data taker, that's an annuity conversation to have. You don't want to shoehorn an annuity where it doesn't fit, but to have the conversation, to at least consider it, I think is very important.
I can hear it now. Do you hear it now? It's pushback from a financial professional about, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. This sounds like there's a lot. I mean, I need a lawyer for this. There's a lot of legalese surrounding
Mm.
agribusiness and land ownership in general. And that pushback of, well, hold on now, this is more than I'm biting off. I don't want to
Mhm.
sign up for this. Again, fight that pushback. When a
You
financial professional says, "Oh no, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not equipped for this." You guys say what?
Mhm. It's such a good point. So let's make it into 3 bullet points. So number 1, collect data. Don't pretend to be the expert. If you don't know the agribusiness world, it doesn't help for the financial professional to pretend to be an expert in that world. But you are an expert when it comes to various solutions, when it comes to retirement planning and so forth. Okay, collect data, understand the family dynamic. That's number 1. Number 2, in that same conversation, hey, we've got a service with one of our partners at Augustar. Would you be interested in getting a business valuation on your farm? Okay, what about document review? They have a document review service. What does that mean? That means for these farms that have wills set up, trusts set up, power of attorneys, operating agreements, all of that we can look at here at Augustar and assist the financial advisor, the financial professional with those conversations. So that's number 2. Would you like us to do a business valuation or a document review on anything to do with your farm? Okay, nice. Number 3, take that back, do your homework as the financial professional, understand various terms, the lexicon a little bit better, and uncover, okay, what are the key obvious gaps to this? They don't have key person life insurance. They're 55. They're right in that sweet spot to consider an annuity. That's where the financial professional can come in and say, okay, I'm the expert in this space. Let me help on this front. And then I think we're going to touch on this a little bit later, but a referral network. Maybe that first farming family comes in and you don't know a thing about agribusiness. The second or third or fourth family, by then you're going to be an expert in that field. You're going to understand the language. And that's the case with any of these industries, whether it's restaurants or we had a situation where an engineer came to a financial professional, worked at an incredible company with great benefits. They solved for some retirement solutions. That engineer referred the financial professional to a couple of other of his coworkers. Next thing you know, that financial professional is the guy that's helping out all the engineers in his area. So that's what we're talking about. It's a referral gold mine, so to speak. As long as you're patient and you collect data, don't pretend to be the expert if you're not, and then over time you'll gain a lot of knowledge in the field.
Well, you beat me to it, but that's an excellent point about referrals. And we have a lot of advisors that they work with a lot of engineers because that's their market. And this seems like a golden opportunity for an advisor to do it right once and then let people talk and then let the referral network sort of expand from there. I think my question for you would be then, is this an underserviced market? Do you feel like there's tremendous opportunity because no one's having these conversations with them?
I think so. I think it certainly might be an underserviced market. It kind of goes back to how do you approach these conversations, and instead of pushing it to maybe another financial professional that might have more experience in that world, I certainly would say, yeah, it is an underserviced market. So there's a lot of potential to tap into.
I want us to dip our toes in the weeds. See what I did there? And talk estate planning, especially as it pertains to these massive multi-generational farms. So what do you got for me on that front?
Yeah, what my team does a lot of the time, and not just in the agribusiness world, but we talk about these advanced concepts. We mentioned ILET, irrevocable life insurance trust. When it comes to family farms, family limited partnerships is a big topic. IRC section 2302A, special valuation rules, section 6166, which is a way to stretch out the estate taxes when a family receives a big estate tax bill. So, each of those concepts really can warrant their own 1 hour podcast. But I will touch a little bit on section 6166. I think it's very interesting and it's pretty easy to lay out. So let's go back to that $50 million dairy farm. Okay, we've got an estate tax problem. We have an estate tax bill when dad passes away, and we don't want to fork up all of the estate taxes due if we're the heirs. We don't want to have to fork up that money in year one. So what we can do is we can actually stretch out the tax consequences over 14 years. And in the first 5 years, we can pay interest only to the IRS. And then starting year 6, we start paying principal plus interest. And again, for up to 14 years, we can defer that estate tax bill. So that's just one of many, many advanced planning concepts that my team can help with. We are having these conversations, not just with agribusiness, but across the board. So it's a very complex space, but the more you're exposed to it, the more familiar with the language you'll become.
Is the boogeyman still the tax man in these conversations? Is it still Uncle Sam? Is there still the same villain when you're trying to paint these conversations with the agribusiness and farmers?
I think so. Truth be told, I think so. It's always about tax mitigation, tax advantage solutions. Absolutely.
I want to shift gears. I want to go rapid fire. I want to put you on the spot real quick. What is the people in Nebraska, people in middle America hear this conversation and say, okay, I see the point. Then you go to the wings, then you go to other places and you say, well, this
Right.
doesn't count as me. I live in a city. This is, swipe left. What's the area? What's the part of the country that you see as a hotbed for this sort of opportunity?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, to your point, a lot of folks have these preconceived notions of, okay, what is the heart of farming in the United States? You've got your Corn Belt, think Illinois, Idaho. One interesting thing, Dave, I forgot to mention this: 40% of the corn that we harvest goes into ethanol, right? And ethanol is makes up about 10% of the gasoline that we put in our cars. So a lot of our corn is being used for fuel. So the corn belt, you think of the wheat belt, which is Texas up to the Dakotas. But sometimes what you miss out on is, let's talk California. You think national parks, you think the beach, but you don't think about agribusiness. But they are a huge agribusiness player across so many crops. Just one example is wine. Wine production. California makes up 80% of the United States wine production. I mean, that's a big deal, and that's just one of a myriad of different crops that they focus on. Hawaii, people don't think of Hawaii. I mean, most of our coffee that is produced in the United States, which isn't much relative to world production, most of that coffee's produced in Hawaii. New Jersey, there's another one. I mean, you think of highways and you think of suburbs, you think of the Sopranos. What you don't think of is, hey, it's the Garden State, and it's the Garden State for a reason. We're talking cranberries, we're talking blueberries, tomatoes. So that that state is one of many states that aren't thought about all that much when it comes to big agribusiness footprints, but they absolutely do. So that just to touch on your question there.
No, those are the New Jersey one throws me for a loop every time because I'm like you. I think Sopranos and I think highways. I don't think farms, but you're telling me no. Cranberries all over New Jersey. That's why they call it the Garden State. You didn't know that? The last thing I want to touch on, and this is a loaded question, and this is a heavy one, but I think you're well positioned to answer it. Is what's the next? Look into your crystal ball. What's the next 10 years look like for this industry in the United States?
Yeah, it goes back to, there are a lot of farms that are very, very successful in the United States, but the macroeconomic trend is clear, and it's not just to do with these giant conglomerates. It's to do with, here's a stat for you. Over the next the average farmer is 58, 59, 60 years old. Okay. Over the next 30 years, 70% of farms are going to be changing hands. They're going to the next generation. And as we mentioned, the next generation isn't all that interested on continuing those farming legacies, especially when we have to rely year after year after year on emergency style bailout money. Now, I will say there is we're in an incredible period of innovation, technology. That's what's so ironic about this, about the big picture here, is that when it comes to farm technology, whether it be drones kind of overseeing the crops or GPS and precision farming. Here's another automated machinery. John Deere tractors are now self-driving. It is not, we're not in the experimental phase anymore. We're in the real deal. We're in the future. It's incredible. But at the same time, it's that next generation of farmers that just aren't all that interested in continuing on. What is the number one thing I'm hearing when I look at these interviews of farmers across the country, from California to Arkansas, and just across the board, is we don't want bailout money. I mean, we'll take it, of course, but that's a Band-Aid. We need some sophisticated, long-term, sustained federal legislation that's really going to help us out, and be the stitches to our problem, not just a Band-Aid. And you hear this everywhere in the farming community. So that's kind of the big picture. We need to look at, is there going to be some kind of farm bill that is going to provide a long runway for farming families to come? But the ultimate thing is, okay, during that passing to the next generation, that passing of hands we mentioned, where do financial professionals fit into that picture? Okay, with succession planning, that's key. Life insurance, with retirement planning, annuities, with investments. When it comes to selling a farm, right? If the heirs of the senior family member want nothing to do with it, well, let's get a business valuation. Let's put it on the market and let's see what we can do. And mitigating certain taxes, using tax advantage solutions. So, that was a little verbose, Dave, but that's kind of my big picture.
Well,
What do you think?
I mean, you just summed up exactly what the overall takeaway from me from this conversation is this is a generational wealth transfer conversation for a lot of financial professionals, and realizing that and approaching them that way could be the real opportunity, and not, oh, I got to learn how a cotton gin works, or I got to learn how a combine works. No, 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 no,
I need
no.
to
That's
visit a
not what
John
you need.
Deere dealership.
Yeah, yeah. That's not the takeaway. Please don't do that. Don't go buy overalls. Don't do any of that. But familiarize yourself with the hierarchy and the landscape of the agribusiness world. And I think there's tremendous opportunity, like you've just alluded to so much. So Carlos, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I hope we hit on all the talking points. I think you touched on a lot. You touched on a lot. So I hope we were able to give you the runway to to share what you guys do at Augustar.
Absolutely. So happy to be on, Dave. Really appreciate the time.
And thank you so much for watching. We hope you picked up on something. We hope you picked up on a great opportunity to implement into your financial practice. If you're looking for more ways to grow it, take a look around our YouTube channel. There's all sorts of resources for you to glob onto. Go down a selling with stories rabbit hole and really build out your practice through stories. I'd love to see it. And of course, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.